Good morning. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Hannah Chu, Director of Air Mobility here at Connected Places Catapult. Today is the first Pathfinder community event since I joined Connected Places Catapult, my first community event on this side of the screen, I should say. It's my privilege to welcome you all here today. Before we look forward to today and hear from our speakers, I'd like to take a moment to pause and reflect on the successes on which we're building today. Pathfinder was launched in 2017 before the CAA Sandbox and the Future Flight Challenge were in place, and other mechanisms to support the development of technology, regulation and market acceptance of this new class of air vehicle. The Drone Industry Action Group has been a driving force and continues to support the Pathfinder activity. The level of involvement of Connected Places Catapult was down to the vision and drive of Mark Westwood, our former Chief Technology Officer. Mark has now, unfortunately for us, left Connected Places Catapult and will soon start at Cranfield University in his new role. Like he says, his second dream job, and we send him much congratulations for this. We are looking forward to him starting there and know that this move will be brilliant for the drone community, bringing our two unique organisations closer together so we can best anchor value in the UK through our company's collaboration. Today we have a packed agenda, hearing from our steering committee and delivery team first off, and later from members of our stakeholder community. We will have a panel Q&A session at the end of each section. Unfortunately today Fozia and Simon need to leave us at 10:30, so we're going to take a stop after Simon's presented to give you the opportunity to reach out to Fozia and Simon before they leave us. Please add your Q&A questions to the box at the bottom of the screen and we will work through them. Our hope is that we can answer all your questions live. If not, we will endeavour to answer them soon after the presentation. Also, some further housekeeping. This is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. All registrants will get a link to the recording so you can watch back in the future. So without further ado, given the quality of the agenda today, I'm really looking forward to hearing from our speakers. I'm going to hand over to Fozia for a DFT update from our steering committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hannah. Good morning, everyone. Fozia Chuktar here from DFT, I'm the policy lead for Unmanned Aircraft. I'll just talk briefly about the work that the department is doing around new aviation technologies. The government wants to make use of new technologies to transform the movement of people and goods and deliver tangible benefits to communities, industry and its users. And we want to be able to offer new options on how people and goods can move around. But in doing that, we need to make sure that anything new is introduced in a way that is safe, secure, environmentally sustainable and publicly acceptable. To do this, and to realise the maximum benefits of new aviation technologies, we're working to ensure the necessary policy, regulatory, legislative framework is in place by working with other government departments and the Civil Aviation Authority, as well as supporting all the good work being done by the Connected Places Catapult and Future Flight Challenge programmes. The department's next step will be to work on a strategic framework for the sector, exploring key issues such as regional connectivity, noise, innovation and regulation. And we're considering whether we can consult on these, and we'll make sure that we keep you all informed of progress. And we'll send out links, etc., via email through CPC to all those registered on the event today. Drones are on everyone's radar, and some of you may have seen the announcement last week from the Cabinet Office on plans to review EU regulations that were automatically kept on the statute books after Brexit, known as retained UK law. These regulations are going to be scrutinised by government to ensure that they're helping the UK to thrive as a modern, dynamic, independent country and foster innovation across the British economy. The government plans to set out a package of individual regulatory reforms to laws inherited while a member of the EU building on recommendations recently submitted to government by the Task Force for Regulatory Reform, Innovation and Growth. One area on the regulatory reform list is to reconsider regulations to allow the spraying of plant protection chemicals from drones. Farmers can already use drones to do this by applying to the Health and Safety Executive, and they are working to update their guidance and enable this to happen a lot easier in future. I will put links on the regulatory reform programme in the chat after this, so people can see the full details and get any further information that they need. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event. And I'm going to hand over now to Simon Masters, I think, from FFC.
Thanks, Fozia, and good morning, everyone. I just want to take this short period of time just to give a bit of an update on the activities around the Future Flight Challenge. I'll go into the slides in a second, but before I do that, as a general update, we are progressing with our phase 2 projects. So we have 48 collaborative research projects that are currently running, and some of you may well be involved in those. We're really delighted with the progress those projects are making, and we are expecting some more demonstrator flights to happen in the next few weeks, and hopefully before the weather turns a bit less kind towards the flying of drones. We've recently published our roadmap and vision, which you can access on our website, and this sets out our vision for the future of aviation by 2030, and with a roadmap and some steps to achieve that by 2024. We're very grateful for all those who contributed to this, but we know that everyone has different opinions. If you do have time to go and look at it on our website, please do. And if you have any thoughts, or if you disagree with what you see, we'd very much like to hear from you. This is meant to be about discussion. It's not us setting out a sort of set of absolutes, and we very much welcome the discussion that may come from any different opinions to our own. But the most of the work we've been doing over the last few months has been around our Future Flight Phase 3 competition, which is now launched. So if we could have the next slide, please. So I'm just going to run through some of the key points for the competition. We did a briefing event last week where we've covered some of this, and we're very grateful to the support from the KTN, who are been running a number of events and online platforms to allow people to come together and look for partners if they are looking to put in a proposal. So the scope of the competition, I've taken the wording directly from the website so I don't say anything incorrect. That is very much setting out what we want from this competition. It is quite similar in some ways to the phase 2 competition, except we want more. So we want more ambition, we want more demonstration, and we want more integration. So we want to see companies working together, perhaps who don't know each other yet, perhaps who are from different parts of the sector or even outside of aviation. And we want them to work together around the 3 classes of aircraft you can see on the slide. And with projects welcome that have a specific regional focus, and absolutely for ones that have sort of net zero transport solutions. Next slide, please. So we structured this competition around 2 strands. Strand 1 is for larger demonstrator projects of those different classes of aircraft. And we want those demonstrations to be in as representative an environment as possible. We're aware that some projects currently we're funding have made some great strides in the use of automation, of sensing, and have managed to fly drones away from the public, away from things that they might hit if anything went wrong. And we're aware that is a very necessary step on the development of these technologies. However, for phase 3, we very much want to see vehicles operating in as close to a representative environment as possible. So to that end, we very much want to see end users involved, or operators involved in your projects. And we'd like to see a demonstration of the regulatory requirements and the applicants understand what type of regulatory approvals they may need, and have given some consideration to how they may carry that out. And we will, as we have been so far, be working closely with James Bell and colleagues at the CAA in order to try and support projects in doing so. Strand 2 recognises that there are actually some key enabling technologies that will also be needed that maybe aren't quite as mature and maybe aren't quite ready for an integrated demonstrator. So there is a separate strand to try and develop those technologies, and we will be offering slightly less funding for those projects. Next slide, please. So who should be bidding? It's a fairly long list, but we are after innovative companies who are involved in the sort of areas you can see on the screen and probably more. This is not an exhaustive list, but we are very much encouraging people who may not necessarily see themselves as aviation companies or drone companies, but who may well have technologies that could support those who are in the thick of things at the moment. And as I say, because we are looking for sort of integrated projects with covering as much of the different aspects as possible, then these are some of the areas that we'd like to see. Next slide, please. Again, very much welcome new entrants, people who have not worked with us before. We have a number of sort of packages and support for organisations who have not received our funding before or are less familiar with our processes, and we very much welcome them, and we will very much support them as best we can. And as it says at the bottom, actually, those looking to work with others, all of these projects will have to be collaborative, and actually a lot of the great innovation comes from that spirit of collaboration and with organisations working together towards a common aim. Next slide, please. So these are some key points, perhaps in response to questions we've had before, and perhaps to sort of allay any concerns or any rumours. So to be part of this competition, there is no requirement to have been previously involved with future flight activities. If you have been involved and you are involved in an existing project, the success or otherwise of that project will not be a factor in how your project is assessed in phase 3. And the final point is we will take a slightly more closer look. We want to work with projects rather than leaving you all on your own for a couple of years. So we very much want to work with you. We understand this is a fast-moving industry, and we want to be receptive to and supportive of any changes that may happen during that, so that applicants can, or successful projects can meet their individual aims, but also to help us meet our future flight aims. And we very much want that to be a partnership where we can implement changes where it's in the best interest of all concerned. Next slide, please. So I think this is the final slide. So we want to encourage knowledge sharing across projects to develop the sector as a whole. In terms of timing, so we anticipate these projects would start in April of next year, and they would have to finish by March 2024. We do understand that for some organisations might be a slightly unhelpful time period. And if you have any concerns about that, please do come and talk to us. At this stage, we're not able to offer any sort of extension beyond the end of March, but if you're able to describe the broader context of the work you're doing, it may well help us to understand what's achievable by the end of March, and then clearly from your organisation's point of view, what work you will then continue to do after the end of future flight. Final point, probably most important, if you do have any questions, whilst we are always happy to hear from people, and I'm happy to take questions today, we do ask that questions are formally submitted to our customer support service. The contact details are on the slide. The reason we do this is so that any questions you have are logged formally, and if there is information that is relevant to other applicants, we can share it. And in the unlikely event of any complaints or anything, that there is a formal record of the questions asked and what responses are. So I know it does seem a little bit impersonal, and you may be wondering why you can't just pick up the phone or send me an email or send an email to the rest of the team, but there is a good reason for this. And I say the customer support service can probably answer more than half of the questions that get submitted, and the ones they can't answer, they do send on to us very, very quickly. That was my last slide, so thank you very much, and I think we will have some questions now.
Thank you, Simon and Fozia, for opening the event with that information. I can see we don't currently have any questions in the chat box, so hopefully that will have stimulated some. Simon, if a company listening today has an idea, thinks they have a technology that might fit into Future Flight Phase 3, how would they go about joining a consortium or finding out about what's going on already in the community?
So the KTN Knowledge Transfer Network have run a number of events. They've got an online platform where organizations who are looking to partner with others have submitted 2-minute videos. I think there's at least 40 or 50 on there now. And I think there's the opportunity to still contribute to that. There are, and I was only saying this yesterday, so apologies, wasn't able to add that to my slides. There are a number of hyperlinks to the different events and different recordings of what the KTN have done. And I'm very happy to share those. And that will give a good, hopefully a good explanation as to what the support they're offering is and how we are working with organizations who want to take part and find other partners.
Thank you. I think it would be useful to share some of those links. Personally, I found the Future Flight Ambition presentation that you and the team gave a few weeks ago really, really informative. So if anyone does not know about Future Flight Phase 3 and the ambition of that challenge, I do recommend you go and look there. Also, the Future Flight cafes that KTN have been running, those links that you mentioned, Simon, they're a bit more of a deep dive into some of the Phase 2 projects. So again, if you're unfamiliar, some of those are very specifically drone focused. So that might be a place people can get more information about what's going on. And of course, Connected Places Catapult is active in Phase 3. So you can, if you knowing what we do here, reach out to us, to Andrew Chadwick or myself. So we can talk to you about those. Yeah, Simon, Tony's asked if you could share the links. So if in the background, actually, I know you're ducking off, aren't you, soon? So if you don't manage to get them out there, we'll work on that as well in your absence, so all the delegates have access to those during the course of this morning.
Of course.
The other thing that might be worth mentioning, thinking about networking, is in Zoom, of course, we're not mixing face to face and we're not having those conversations in passing and sharing business cards. So do please use the chat box to introduce yourself. You may find that there's quite a richness within our community today. So I would encourage you all to use that facility, you know, as a virtual business card to let people know you're here if that interests you. Hannah from KTN is on the line, so she's just put her email address up there. So if there's anything further to the links that you need with regards to joining in those collaborations, you can reach out. Fozia, we do have a question here from Quentin. Quentin, thank you for reaching out. When you talk about the strategic framework, you did not specifically mention UTM. What is the plan for some sort of use-based regulation like in the EU, and what are the steps to get there?
So there is a team at DFT currently working on this, and I can forward that question on to them. I don't want to say anything that goes that's not quite up to date or anything, or give any timescales for any of that, but I'm happy to take that away and provide an update to the group after this.
Thank you, Fozia. Things do move quickly, don't they? So I think it's always worth making sure we're up to speed. So we do have a question in the chat, Simon, that's coming back to Future Flight. Aren't the timescales very, very tight to submit an application? Phase 2 gave a lot longer to create partnerships, and a lot of companies are struggling to hold meetings and work out who to partner with while simultaneously delivering on Phase 2. Why the tight deadline?
I think we were in a position where the program itself finishes at the end of March 2024, and when we've kind of worked backwards, in order to allow phase 3 projects to have as long as possible to deliver what they want to do. We've sort of left ourselves in the position where we launched the competition when we have done, and the deadline, I don't think it's in my slides, the deadline for applications is November the 3rd. I think we'd always love to be able to offer more time, but I think it's a balance between having the competition open for longer and allowing you more time to put together applications. But on the other hand, that kind of might eat into the amount of time you have to actually carry out your work. So I'm happy to admit there's probably no perfect answer to this, and we may or may not have got that balance right, but that was certainly the rationale behind the timings that we've ended up with.
Thank you. Yes, I think very much constrained by the duration of the challenge and the many things we have to do. It looks as though we have answered the questions. Rishi, thank you for putting your details into the question and answer box. If you pop that into the chat, then everyone else will be able to see it. Unfortunately, only the panelists get to see the questions, and it would be a shame for you to miss that opportunity. Is there anything else while we're on the line that people would like to ask, or maybe we might get ahead? Because I imagine
Hannah, sorry, it's Gordon Baker. I'm speaking soon, but I noticed Sarah had some questions at the very top of the chat.
Oh, I'm ever so sorry.
One about police and one about EU stuff, just before they go.
Yeah, I saw Sarah's question at the top, and I think I just need to speak to Sarah offline about that one and just check that I understand exactly what she's asking. So I think I did put that in the chat, but maybe it hasn't come through. But Sarah, I'm happy to take that up offline with you. I'll email you.
And I think there was a question underneath for me about whether the police being an end user would be acceptable. The answer is yes, absolutely. We've had interest from police, fire, rescue, NHS, sort of other similar public sector bodies, and very much happy for them to be involved as an end user, and as with the sort of requirement for an end user that I stated, then yes, the police would very much be sort of fit into that category.
And again, I think if you're able to follow up with some of the future flight cafes, the drone related ones, there are a number of blue light service use cases that are being discussed within some of the phase 2 projects as well. So it may be there's already learnings that you can benefit from with what's been done in the past. All right, well, I think Simon and Fozia, it's gone quiet. I'm really delighted to see people popping their details into the chat. The chat will be available to you both afterwards as well, so you won't miss out on that networking. Thank you very much for opening our community event today. It was great to hear from you both, and I very much look forward to seeing the successful phase 3 projects in the new year. Simon, good luck with all of that.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Bye.
All right, Gordon, are you ready to go as we move into the next section? So we'll finish now our steering committee presentations. We have Gordon presenting from BAYS, and then we'll have James presenting from the CAA before we move into the delivery team presentations. So Gordon's with us. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thanks, Hannah. And I don't know if you want to turn that screen visual off so you can see more of me or not, as you choose. So yes, good morning. I'm Gordon Baker. I work in the technology, strategy and security team within BAYS. BAYS and DFT work closely on drone policy. BAYS is the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. We have a team essentially supporting business growth through adoption of new technologies. My focus is robotics and autonomous systems, very much including drones in that scope. And I've been around the drone community for a number of years since a previous role I had, looking really at the opportunities for innovation and innovators and the challenges that innovators faced in the commercial drone world. Since that time, I've worked a lot with the Drone Industry Action Group, and I'll be giving an update on the sort of policy work that we're doing with them, as well as a couple of regulatory updates I've got from my BRE colleagues. The Better Regulation Executive sits within BAYS. They've been active recently too. So the principal thing I want to tell you about is a focus we've got now, essentially in response to Ian Gray, the chair of the Drone Industry Action Group. He came to government saying we should articulate a vision for the drone sector. We've had for a couple of years a counter drone strategy written by government, but we've got nowhere where we articulate what are we aspiring to achieve and how are we going about that in the UK. And so a couple of months ago, Robert Courts, the aviation minister at DFT, announced at a Westminster Forum event he was at, in a speech he gave, that we would be doing a joint ambition statement for the commercial drone sector. So that's joint DFT and BAYS, i.e. joint across government, because there'll be other departments involved as well, but jointly with the sector, and in particular with the Drone Industry Action Group and Ian as the chair of that. So we're working with a small group of individuals within the Drone Industry Action Group to start to put this work together. The aim of it is essentially to articulate a vision, as I say, for the sector out to about 2030, outlining core elements of tech development and regulation to enable new capabilities and new business applications. It's going to build on all the future flight challenge work, and very much be set in this context of future transport, future flight ambitions, with safety, autonomy, low carbon ambitions at its core. But really, the way it's developing at speed at the moment is with a focus on near term, on the immediate opportunities of drones, and to raise awareness and uptake of these opportunities using currently available, currently regulatorily allowable UK-based technologies, and increase the uptake and adoption by end users of that. So the aim is to essentially to inspire new drone services, public sector, private sector, and tell the benefit story in terms of cost and efficiencies, but also safety and carbon, and inspire that uptake, and also to tell the story of what business support is available from government and how you can go about growing. So it's targeting the sector as well as targeting the end users in that ambition. The scope will be limited to commercial drone use, small drones, but then also telling the story of the bigger drone opportunity, but excluding manned aviation and excluding counter drone activities. So we'll reference those, but that's not the focus of this. As part of that work, we're also working with PwC to update their 2018 Skies Without Limits report. That 2018 document is the origin of the 42 billion total addressable market figure that has been quoted a lot. And so they are rerunning that story and rebaselining based on what they've seen to make sure that we've got an accurate picture of that total addressable market. And that's going to be including looking very much in at sort of subsectors. Previously, it looked at sort of 7 big headline sectors. There'll be much more granularity in the next version. I'm getting into the individual sectors that we can address and the use cases that sort of principally will be driving the value benefits in those areas. And we'll also deliver a number of use cases of UK companies, expressing the gains they've made and how that's been achieved. So if that's of interest to you and you want to tell me what you think we should be doing, please get in touch. And if you know organizations we should be tapping to get their insights and to understand what should be done, please let me know. So that's point one. Point two is essentially a few small regulatory updates. I know a number of you have been working, responding to the Regulatory Horizons Council's work on drones. Just a very short update from that team. They are in their sort of final drafting phases. They thank everybody for their engagement. There will be a publication in due course. I think it's currently earmarked for sort of circa November. There isn't a specific date yet in mind for that, but it is happening, and we'll soon see the fruits of that significant activity. It has taken them a bit longer than they expected, but I've seen the drafts coming together, and it's I think some really stimulating stuff in there. Also wanted to just point out that last week, the Regulatory Pioneer Fund, this is actually the fund that initially inspired the CAA sandbox a few years ago. They had round 2 funding announced last week, and 3 small projects related to drones. I'll put the link in the chat. But one specifically around developing new standards for containers that carry medical deliveries, sort of hazardous goods. So what do those boxes need to look like so that they are allowed to do that, so they're permitted? There's going to be some new standards on that. Number 2, there's going to be a new service, a new portal, a new delivery mechanism run by the CAA, where the public can report safety concerns they have about drones. That's an issue that the CAA has become, well, we're all aware of, so that's going to be a sort of centralized point that they manage for that. And then a small project also run by Oxfordshire County Council, just helping innovators understand their responsibilities when setting up drone trials in their area. So I'll, as I say, pop the link into the chat of that, and that's all I want to say for now. Thank you.
Gordon, thank you so much for your time this morning and for that update for the community. I'd like now to hand over to James to run through the Civil Aviation Authority update.
Great, thank you, Hannah, and thanks everybody for joining this morning. Great to be here at another Pathfinder community event. If I could have the next slide, please. So I'm James Bell, the Innovation Strategy Lead at the CAA within the Innovation Hub that Gordon just mentioned from the previous RPF round. The Innovation Hub was created following that RPF funding in 2019 in order to simplify how you can engage with the CAA to help navigate regulatory challenges that you may face in bringing innovations to the market, and then also with the sandbox to support you with testing new aviation technologies and business models. And so today I just wanted to bring you some updates that were most relevant to this community, focusing on 2 of our innovation programs, as we refer to them. The first being Beyond Visual Line of Sight in non-segregated airspace, and the second is the Carriage of Dangerous Goods by RPAS. So if I could have the next slide, please. So we'll start with Beyond Visual Line of Sight in non-segregated airspace. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to track back to about 18 months ago. We released a document under the very catchy title of CAP 1861, which was BVLOS Fundamentals. And it was a document that we released in order to provide innovators and the market, as well as our own colleagues within the regulator, as an innovation hub document that really stretched out the fundamentals of operating beyond visual line of sight. And one of the things that we've really sort of centered down on is that the BVLOS is not restricted by regulations, and that is the regulatory text. So the legal text does not restrict BVLOS as such. However, we completely recognize that there are still substantial challenges that currently limit the realization of routine BVLOS operations. And these include the technical and regulatory readiness, as we say, of the innovation itself, of the operator, the integrator, the manufacturer, but also then hand in hand with that, the limited evidence that the CAA has in order to define quantitative safety targets. So what is safe enough? I think it's a question that so many people ask all the time. And so we created the first sandbox on the Innovation Hub, which was the BVLOS sandbox. And this was to allow us to learn directly from innovators, but also to help those innovators to improve their regulatory readiness in preparation for applying for regulatory approvals. Clearly, the evidence and the learnings from all of these activities in the sandbox, as well as other programs such as the Future Flight Challenge that's already been discussed, and of course the Pathfinder projects themselves and the Pathfinder program, as well as international developments, are all absorbed into the CAA through the Innovation Hub in order to help us shape the regulatory framework, which includes guidance. And I'll just point on that. So we talk about the regulatory framework, and I'll mention that quite casually throughout this presentation. And that refers to the legal text right the way down through to guidance and acceptable means of compliance. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So having run our BVLOS sandbox for 18 months, coming on towards 2 years now, there's a lot that we've learned. And I think there's a lot that we've helped innovators to learn about the regulatory framework, and some of those, as we term, regulatory challenges associated with trying to operate BVLOS in non-segregated airspace. And one of the things we really centered down on in a document, which was extension of the CAP 1861, looking at CAP 1861A, and I'll plop all these links in the chat afterwards, was around the detect and avoid ecosystem. So detect and avoid is one of those things that we've determined is required, or one of three options, I guess, required by a drone in order to operate in non-segregated airspace, and it's a really challenging one. So we've decided to introduce a detect and avoid challenge, and a document was released recently. The links at the bottom of that slide for this one, which is the detect and avoid challenge, consisting of 3 technology demonstrator sandboxes. And I'll say this is based around CAP 1861A and that detect and avoid ecosystem. And the first of those technology demonstrators will be focused on non-cooperative sensors. So that's either aircraft or land-based sensors that can detect aircraft that are not electronically conspicuous. They're not sharing their position, their information. And so we want drones to be able to see those digitally in the sky. And so using either aircraft or land-based sensors can support that. And it's expected that in order to operate in Class G non-segregated airspace, BVLOS operations will require 1 or more non-cooperative sensors to detect those airspace users. So the goal of this first sandbox is to explore the performance requirements of these types of sensors and investigate the applicability and sufficiency of the various technical standards that are being developed across industry. Looking back then to what we've learned in the existing BVLOS sandbox, we're quite excited to be able to publish our first sandbox report with FlyLogix, and this is something that we've looked to do. We'll look to do more of as a way of sharing what's happened in the sandbox and just providing that added bit of transparency on the progress that we're making. So I say we've published. Actually, I hoped we would have published by this presentation. It's in progress. It should be up within the next week or so. So do keep an eye on our website. But essentially, this just describes the activities that FlyLogix were involved in and the support that we gave them in their iterative roadmap towards routine BVLOS. Next slide, please. There's some other work we're doing on the BVLOS innovation program. Working with the Pathfinder catalyst on drone in a box scenarios. So drone in a box is a BVLOS use case that has many applications. Clearly it's not in the kind of box that you've got there on the picture, much more complex than that. But together with the Pathfinder catalyst program, the Innovation Hub has been carrying out some qualitative risk assessments of several potential use cases in order to help the program to target the lower risk opportunities for demonstrations. So we expect to see the first of these applications coming through soon, initially, I guess, operating EVLOS. And then outside of that typical kind of innovation space that we're used to operating in, we've also seen with some press coverage recently, the Sky Guardian, the General Atomics MQ-9B, operating its first BVLOS flight in Class G airspace over the UK. And this was in August and September. This has flown several flights across the UK, transitioning through several classes of airspace, including non-segregated Class G airspace above flight level 100. And of course, as I mentioned before, as with everything else, the learnings from this and the other activity that's going on across the CAA will be absorbed into helping us shape that future regulatory framework. Next slide, please. And I think this was the one that might garner the most interest, I think, is that, as I say, we've learned a lot over the last couple of years. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of accelerated work through the Future Flight Challenge, through Pathfinders and other programs. And so the numerous challenges that I mentioned at the start regarding BVLOS are becoming more apparent and increasingly understood. We want to be able to set ourselves the right goals and incremental steps as the regulator in order to evolve that regulatory framework. So this needs to draw together many complex regulatory strands across the flight operations, airspace, air traffic management, certification, security, etc. And we also have to do this while maintaining our existing CAA duties that span across all other airspace users. And so to this end, we're in the early stages of writing, as it says there, a regulatory roadmap to routine BVLOS in 2024. And we expect that there'll be opportunities for you all to engage in this in the near future. Next slide, please. So I'm going to move on to Carriage of Dangerous Goods by ARPAS. And this is another program that we're operating in parallel with the BVLOS program. Next slide, please. So with COVID-19 over the last, what is now sort of couple of years, obviously this has brought to light, really shone a light on the need to keep those remote and disconnected communities connected. And drones have been proven to sort of enhance that services to those disconnected communities. And so we've been looking since February at reviewing internal processes and procedures, listening to operators and identifying challenges associated with ARPA's carriage of dangerous goods. And so we've created CAP 2248, and there's a link there in the slides, as a fundamentals guide for innovators on the considerations and requirements for carrying dangerous goods by ARPAs. And so that document runs through, as I say, the fundamentals, through some examples of typical dangerous goods classifications and where to find more information on those. But then it also uses a category called UN 3373, which is biological substances, as an example and a case study to run through that document, giving some real life application of those considerations for dangerous goods. So next slide, please. And so through this work, as I say, UN 3373 is I guess a basic starting point for considering, as it's equivalent to a COVID-19 test kit. So you receive them at home, you complete the kit, and you'll notice on the back of the box it has big slap UN 3373, goes in the post box. And with the packaging that you're required to put that in, I think it's a few cellophane bags in a box, that is deemed safe enough, considering the contents. So what we're trying to do here is use that as a basic starting point. But obviously there are more complex dangerous goods that exist out there, which we want to enable drones to be able to carry. And so beyond this limited category of dangerous goods, the guidance linked to the new ARPAS regulations that came in 2020 describe how an ARPAS can carry dangerous goods under the specific category if the item resides within a container that will not allow leakage following a crash. However, the specifications for such a container don't exist formally yet. And so we've set up a project, as Gordon mentioned, was successfully selected under the BEIS Regulators Pioneer Fund earlier this month, in order to develop a crash test regime and pass-fail criteria with the Vehicle Certification Agency, the VCA, who do a lot of the dangerous goods testing for current aviation commercial airlines, but also with the medical regulator, the MHRA. And this work will look to be completed by March 2022, and we hope to be able to publish some really good results from that. I believe that's my last slide, so I'm going to say the next slide. If you want any more information, you've got the link there to the Innovation Hub. I've seen a comment, obviously the links in the slides aren't clickable. They will be when you receive them, but I will plop some details in the chat as well, so you can get to those sooner rather than later. Thanks very much, and back to Hannah.
So I'm not sure if Hannah's there, but we'll go straight to me. So it's my slides next. So I think we're going to go with a series of presentations now on the various delivery work streams in the Pathfinder Catalyst program. So my name's David, and I'm a systems engineer in part of the delivery team, delivering the industry engagement and demonstration work streams in the Catalyst program. So today I'll just be giving a quick update on behalf of the team, be a bit of a whistle-stop tour because there's quite a variety of stuff we're doing here. So next slide, please. So just to start off, I just wanted to show you the kind of high-level approach and logic behind the demonstration and engagement workstream. So really a core objective of the Pathfinder Catalyst program is to drive drone adoption in the UK across sectors. And to do this, we're aiming to create industry pull rather than a kind of technology push, if you like. So I'll talk a little bit about how we do that shortly. So in terms of how we identify the use cases, we've got this kind of three-pronged approach. So we've been looking at sector-focused use cases in certain target industries, for example, housing, agriculture, and rail. We've been looking at use cases which are enabled by developments in technology and regulation, and how those technologies could then be slotted into various industries in the UK. And then we've been looking at cross-sector use cases, which are very much transferable across a broad range of different industry verticals. So I'll kind of use this, these three as a bit of a framework to talk through what we've been up to. So next slide, please. So first off, I'll just talk about the sector-focused work. And before I do that, just to really quickly go over how we approach these sector-focused work streams. So we've got 3 phases, which are very interlinked. They kind of run into each other, as this diagram shows. Starting off with the discovery, which is really about mapping and kind of prioritizing use cases and what's going on in the market currently. The analysis and demonstration, which is about articulating why something's worth doing to the market and demonstrating its feasibility. And of course, most importantly, supporting the market. So this is about creating the industry pull, not just pushing the technology. And it's about creating a legacy for continued development in the market. So, it's about creating the materials, the initiatives that people can use afterwards once the program's over. So with that approach in mind, I'll take you through some of the sector-focused work streams. So we'll have the next slide, please. So first one is housing, and this is the most mature of our sector work streams. Rather than talk through it, I'll show you one I prepared earlier. So this is a video which is one of the outputs of that housing work stream, which, like I said, is kind of almost concluded. So I'll play this video now, and that'll explain a little bit about the demonstration we've done in this sector. Connected Places Catapult is the UK's innovation accelerator for cities, transport and places. As part of the DFT-funded Drone Pathfinder Catalyst programme, we're here today with Yorkshire Housing and Vantage UAV to demonstrate the benefits of using drones to inspect buildings and property. The inspection, maintenance and repair of buildings and property is a major cost for organisations, especially housing associations.
So a typical building like this one, to get up to the different levels of roof that we have on the building, we would need scaffolding, we'd need maybe a cherry picker. We'd obviously have our staff, our surveyors working at height as well, which obviously introduce costs and danger. And of course, this building is occupied. We have residents in there, so it's quite intrusive.
This is where drones come in, as they allow you to capture high-quality imaging and data without the need for unsafe manual inspection at height.
We're looking at whether or not we have leaks in the roof, there are cracked tiles, or more causant factors. We also are taking videos, and we will merge all of this together to allow us to create 2-dimensional and a 3-dimensional image of the building. And that output will allow Yorkshire Housing to have complete digitalised representation of their asset.
It's something we've been wanting to do, but really didn't have the partners in place to enable us to do that. But from what I've seen so far, we can get much closer, a lot of detail of the property. And from a Yorkshire Housing point of view, that means we can plan more effectively for how we repair and maintain our buildings in the future.
Vantage UAV are one of the many drone service providers on the market today, and the market's expected to grow significantly over the next few years. To find out more about how the Connected Places Catapult is helping unlock the benefits of drone services, please get in touch. Good stuff. So I've been told my mic's a little bit quiet, so hopefully it's a bit louder now. Let me know if it's not. So that video was a small part of the outputs that we created in the housing sector, which we've been using to drive awareness and adoption across that sector. So the other things we've done are listed here, and we'll share the links, and the links are in this PowerPoint, so you can check through them. But to start off, we released a case study about the case for drone inspection in the UK, and that's not just about the housing sector, it's really about how that can be applied to different sectors as well, and the benefits it can bring. So I'd really encourage you to check out if you're interested in inspection use cases. We ran a webinar, which is recorded, and you can see that later if you want, which was targeting the end users in the housing sector, like I said, to drive that pull. And then we have an ongoing initiative called the Connected Places DIN Lab, which is Howie's going to talk about that later, one of my colleagues, so I won't go into too much detail, but it's an initiative to continue the opportunities for housing providers to get involved. So hopefully that's brought the demos to life by showing one that's quite mature. So now I'll talk through some of the stuff we've got in the pipeline. So if we go to the next slide, please. So in terms of the additional sector-focused work streams, we've got rail and agriculture underway currently, both kind of partway between that discovery phase and the kind of coming on to demonstrations and analysis. So in rail, it's possible that drones can be used to reduce human risk and improve operating efficiencies through things like maintenance surveying, incident response, and kind of preempting track failures. So in this work stream, we're going to be demonstrating how Network Rail's flight management system can be used. We're going to be showcasing 4 use cases, which highlight the potential for drone use within rail, but also applicable to other industries. So, visual inspection of tracks, thermal imaging, first response, etc. And then we might be looking at kind of linking up with one of the other work streams to demonstrate how automated flight could be used in the rail sector. Now, in the agricultural sector, it's possible that drones could be used to capture and analyze greater kind of quality and resolution of data than some of the other methods currently. So they're often competing with satellites in terms of capturing data. And that's so farmers and agronomists can carry out precision interventions, potentially reducing the costs of products and improve crop yields. So in this work stream, we're really trying to understand how that can be done using drones, really importantly exploring how that actually would integrate into current working practices so it can be adopted, and then understanding the regulatory roadmaps to enable things like spraying, which aren't quite as mature in the UK at the moment as they perhaps are elsewhere. Next slide, please. So that concluded the kind of sector-focused use cases, and so the other kind of one of the other prongs that we're looking at is this regulation and technology-enabled use cases. So we've particularly been looking at automation technologies and how they can be used in industry, specifically drone in a box. So this is where a drone's coupled with a docking station, in a very simplistic kind of way of explaining it, to protect and charge the drone without physical intervention from a human operator. So naturally, that's kind of increasing the automation of drone solutions and could increase the economic viability across quite a wide range of use cases and sectors, which is the kind of reason we're looking at this kind of technology. So in this work stream, we're aiming to demonstrate some of the capabilities of these solutions, and in particular demonstrations that kind of fit within the UK's regulatory roadmap towards BVLOS. So of course, acknowledging that some use cases at the moment are going to be EVLOS and seeing which ones could be commercially viable at the moment. So progress monitoring, potentially regular inspection, and some security use cases. We're going to be looking at some of the remaining hurdles to implementing these autonomous technologies. And then working with the CAA, DFT, solution providers, industry to kind of overcome some of those, and then guiding end users on how they can implement autonomous solutions as well. So to do that, we've partnered with a couple of drone-in-a-box solution providers. We're also engaging with the CAA to understand how automated solutions fit within that roadmap that I spoke about. And then we plan to demonstrate what's possible today and in the near term using these technologies to kind of gain the interest and attention of the industry that will be using them, hopefully. So next slide, please. So our final prong was this kind of cross-sector use case way of looking at things. So this is really focusing on the use cases with the high potential of mass adoption, among other practical considerations, but promoting those across sector to maximize impact. So you can kind of see the matrix on the right-hand side kind of demonstrates that we're choosing use cases which cut across and have the greatest reach. So to deliver this, we've partnered with RPAS, and they'll be using their kind of networks expertise to create the materials for this and roadshow across multiple sectors at trade shows, CPD events, and webinars, just to get the maximum reach and really target those end user industries. Yeah, so I think that's the end of my presentation. So hopefully that's brought to life a little bit about what we're delivering in the demonstration and engagement work streams and why we're doing it. I would encourage you to check out the material we've released to date. So I'll paste the links in the chat, and they'll be in the presentations. And then we'll keep you updated on everything else that we're releasing throughout the rest of the program. So thank you very much. I think I'm handing over to Mike Cooper at Trinity McQueen, and I think they'll talk through our Drones for Good and public perception work that we've been doing in the Catalyst program. Thank you.
Right, let me, good morning everyone. Let me just share my content. Okay, can everyone see my presentation? Okay, so thanks for the introductions there. What I wanted to talk through for the next 10 minutes or so was a little bit about some research that we're doing. So we've heard quite a bit today about the ambition for the industry, regulations and technology. What I'll be focusing on for the next 10 minutes is looking a bit about public acceptance. So our challenge is to design effective communications that promote the acceptance of drone technology amongst the UK population. So to be able to create effective communications, we need to know about the mood across the UK general public population. What do they think? What are their perceptions? What are their concerns? Where do they see the positives around technology? So at that point, effective communications can talk in a language that tackles the challenges that we're facing. So we've done a study, a bit of a baseline and a piece of research amongst 2,000 UK adults and an in-depth qualitative online community with 100 UK adults that reflects the wider population in terms of the demographic makeup of the UK. And the point of this was to try and get this baseline of what's the environment out there and how should we create effective communications. So I'll talk you through the next 10 minutes, a few of the highlights of the study that's going to help shape communications moving forward. As part of our survey work, we asked people around, what their awareness of drone technology is. So you can see from this that pretty much universal awareness of the term drones. When we start to look into more detail about this, we find that knowledge is, people generally know what drone technology is. They don't know the huge amounts of detail, but they know this from what they've seen in the media, what they've seen in films and what they've seen on the news. So that there's this vague awareness of the technology and sort of what it entails. But when we start to look at their understanding, so we know knowledge is high, but what is the UK population's understanding of drone technology? And you can see that it's quite polarized here. You've got a chunk of people, almost a third, that claim to have a good or a very good understanding. But you've got this void of people that, 2/3 of the population have either got some or very little understanding. So there is this void in actual knowledge about what the regulations are, what the technology is like, and what the use cases and the way that it can benefit the population. So awareness is high, understanding not quite there yet. But encouragingly, those people that are aware do have a broadly positive outlook. So it's either broadly positive or neutral. We don't find there's much strong negativity towards drone technology here and now. So 13% of the population feel negative. You got 39% feel positive. So we're not trying to change a negative view into a positive one. It's almost, to some extent, a bit more of a blank canvas. So this is a real key thing for us when we're designing communications. We know what we're trying to change or what we're trying to communicate to people. And you can see this is quite interesting when we start to see where people feel the increased use of drones in the future. Where are the benefit? Who's going to be the beneficiary of this? So I'll just highlight the blue segments of these charts here. So you can see that the economy, the environment, and to some extent society in general are felt to be the beneficiaries of drone technology. Whereas the gap in knowledge or the gap in what people think and understand is that the personal benefit they will take from drone technology. So again, we're trying to sort of build effective communications. We need to know that people see that there is a general positive impact that drones will have on the UK population, but how are they going to benefit personally, them and their families? That's probably an area to build on with our communications. And when we start trying to get a bit more of an emotional read or an emotional response on how people would feel about drones flying close to their home. So some of the questioning we included within our surveys tried to sort of tease that out. And you can see that the top two stated responses focus around curiosity and interest. So building on my points earlier around, there's not much strong negativity towards drones. This is reflected in how people emotionally respond to the idea of drones being near them. Apprehension, distraction, annoyance, and nervousness does feature to some extent, but it's by no means the driving emotional response. And when we start to dig into what people's concerns are and their fears or the barriers that may drive, may make acceptance harder, we've sort of bucketed up the main concerns into three key areas. So these are the top three driving concerns. So the first one is around almost drones in the wrong hands. So, what happens if people get hold of them that shouldn't have them? So this links to regulation and control. There's an element that's by far the greatest or most prominent fear or concern. The next bucket of issues can surround sort of collision or fall into the ground, drones fall into the ground. A bit more of a safety, sort of technical safety issue. And then the third area is around what data is it capturing, who's storing it, where's it been stored, and what's it being used for. So it's the data, the privacy side of things. The next rung or the next raft of concerns, by no means are these the most prominent, but they are still evident. They under-index in their prominence, but are still, to some extent, things that we need to be aware of when we're talking about communicating and trying to change perceptions. Automation, job losses, so drones doing people's jobs, and then the impact that they may have on visual and noise pollution are, again, they're at the lower end of that spectrum, but they are still, there is still an element that we need to take that into account when we're creating communications. Building on my point around how people feel about drones, so when we pose some scenarios around the increased use of drones in the sky, you can see from this the main bar in the middle of this chart here, you've got 19% of people feel comfortable, 47% feel uncomfortable around the increased use of drones. But when you start to look at that by the level of understanding people have, so my chart at the bottom of this slide, as people have a better understanding of what drones are, their potential uses, regulations surrounding them, their comfort levels become, their comfort levels increase and their concern decreases. So taking this, building this story of telling people, building the picture of the uses and building knowledge, building understanding, almost drives acceptance. So again, this is vital for us when we're creating communications, blueprints, and creative briefs. So the information I've provided back there was sort of a general level. So we had a number of specific applications and use cases that we posed within the research to try and see which ones are driving acceptance, or which ones are going to pose us the biggest challenges, or where the biggest gaps in knowledge are. So you see we've got 5 key buckets here: security and law enforcement, logistics, keeping people safe, so that's the emergency services and search and rescue. Then we have infrastructure, and then a bit of a catch-all bucket. And what we did within the study was look to measure each of these individual use cases for the perceived benefit to the population, also the individual concern. And I'll just show a chart here which tries to summarize this. So I'll draw your attention to 2 things before I hand over. So you can see to the bottom right-hand side of this chart, this is where the perceived benefit to society is greatest, but where the level of individual concern about the use case is low. So delivery of medical supplies, search and rescue, supporting emergency services. These are where there's low concern, but high benefit. So this is the easy sell to the UK population. Whereas we're talking about where the biggest challenges are, so which is the top left-hand quadrant almost of this chart. This is where there's much higher concern, but lower levels of perceived benefit. This is where it's going to be more challenging to drive acceptance. So we need to look at these in these particular use cases and think, well, what are the particular barriers, and what is it that we can say to the UK population to drive acceptance? So the particular use cases we're talking about here are commercial parcel delivery, filming, insurance, and to some extent security monitoring. So these are the areas where we feel it's going to be a bit more of a challenge, and communications are going to have to work that a little bit harder to try and drive acceptance. So that's a snapshot of the research that we've done to date. We are engaging with the industry over the next few weeks to try and develop communications based on this baseline level of insight, which will then go into further rounds of research as the communications start to be developed and we start to test what's really going to work at driving acceptance levels. So that concludes my presentation. I'll stop sharing. I'm going to hand over to Emma Hughes at CPC. Thank you. Thank you, Emma.
Great, thanks, Mike, and good afternoon, or I guess good morning, everyone. Apologies, feels like it's the afternoon, so that's my mistake. Long day already. My name's Emma Hughes. I am one of the SME development managers here at Connected Places Catapult. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is the TRIG program for drones. So it's the Drones Transportation Research and Innovation Grant Program. Next slide, please. So this project, we can go to the next slide as well. It has run from June to November. And for those who don't know what a TRIG is, or a Transport Research and Innovation Grant, these programs were launched by DFT in 2014 to foster innovation in the sector, in the transport sector. And in 2019, Connected Places came on board as a delivery partner. And what we've done is kind of help offer and implement a commercialization focus into the existing framework. So through our collaboration, we support the advancement and commercialization of novel technology, specifically in early stage UK innovators. And so in this TRIG program, so the next slide, I'll show a bit more about kind of what we are doing with our cohort. So for the TRIG drones program, we had 3 challenges that were set out by DFT. We had onboard, detect and avoid, communication and autonomy. And what we sought to do was find novel tech that from SMEs, from universities, or collaborations of those two that we're kind of pushing the edge of the boundary and recreating the art of the possible in these areas. So we had 45 applications received, and we ended up having a cohort of 6 SMEs who joined us, and a total of 180K pounds of grant funding allocated. So what I'm going to do now is just break down a bit of the projects for you, showcase what they're doing, and then give you a bit more information about how to follow up. So next slide, please. So here's our cohort, a great cohort. We have 6 with us. We have Motion Robotics, Pilot Aware, Runicom, Skytech Limited, Snowdonia Aerospace Center, and Survey AR. And what I'll do is just kind of start talking about each of their projects. So if we go to the next slide, we'll start with Motion Robotics. Motion Robotics, their project is called Visiophonic, and what they are working on doing is producing a new detect and avoid system that uses both audio and visual systems, and bring them together to kind of help drones obviously avoid other aircraft. It's a really interesting project to see both the audio and visual side come together. They're testing it on a simulation rig and working to kind of classify UFOs, so unidentified flying objects such as airplanes, helicopters, birds, in this rig, so that drones can implement that onto their programs. Next slide, please. Next up, we have Pilot Aware. They're working on detect and avoid as well. And what they're using is they're building on their electronic conspicuity information system that they have called Pilot Aware. And they'll be kind of using this to detect UAVs present in the airspace and kind of identifying their existing flight path. So what they'll be doing is developing an advanced collision algorithm, which is capable of determining different maneuvers and kind of implementing different levels of autonomy into that. So it's a really exciting project to see and great to see the results from this project so far. Next, we have Rinicom, and their project is called Mesh in the Sky. So Rinicom, they're building off of their kind of their already existing radio and secure radio platform for communications. And what they're doing is basically making a broadband self-healing network between drones. And so they'll be kind of bounding the channels together and making sure that, yeah, there's kind of this interconnection between multiple UAVs. So quite interesting. If one drops out, you know, it still reconnects and the kind of system works. So it's a really interesting system to see and looking forward to see it, the demos come in place. Next, we have Skytech. So Skytech is doing a project called DART, so detect and avoid augmented reality testing. So as the kind of name obviously leads to, is they're using AR to kind of do sense and avoid tests with a drone. And so, yeah, they'll be using AR simulation to kind of test their systems and what that will look like. Next slide, we have Snowdonia. Dragon's Roar, love the project name. It's always great to see some exciting project names come through the TRIG programs. So this is a project done with Snowdonia Aerospace, Swift Flight of Avionics and Wave Mobile. And what they're doing is creating a 4G, 5G network in the sky for operation in areas with quite poor mobile connectivity or not spots, which I think is a great term. And what they're doing is really looking for these to be used by emergency services to kind of help locate missing persons and coordinate with ground personnel. So yeah, it's been great to see the kind of connections come out of this project so far and see the work that they're doing, because I think it'll be really impactful. Next, we have, last but not least, Survey AR. So ASAP's the Autonomous Swarm Atmospheric Assessment Platform. So what this team is doing is they're working to make a swarm system that will kind of monitor weather and air quality in atmospheric different layers. So really, really interesting to kind of use drones in a different way to track kind of air quality in spaces that maybe we aren't able to, just based on kind of safety regulations and other things. So great to see this project come in and using different kind of pre-existing sensors that they have on their drones. So those are the 6 projects. We can go to the next slide. As I said, the project goes until the end of November. So we're kind of in the kind of final key months here of kind of building out the tech, getting ready to do demonstrations. But what I would like to do is invite you to join us at the Transport Innovation Expo on Thursday, the 7th of October. And what we'll be doing is kind of, there'll be an opportunity to hear a bit more from the cohort themselves, hear about their tech and talk to them, ask questions. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is emma.hughes@cp.catapult.org.uk, and happy to talk to you about any of the trigs or this trig in particular. So that's it from me. But yeah, it's a really great program that's part of the wider drone Pathfinder at the Catapult, and we're really looking forward to seeing the tech kind of finish up in the next couple months. So next up, I believe that we have, I just want to make sure we have Howie. So Howie, over to you.
Thank you, Emma. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Hello, everyone. I'm Howie Chow, and I'm a system engineer working at the Connected Places Catapult. As my colleague David mentioned earlier, we organised a building inspection demo to showcase how Yorkshire Housing Association with limited experience with drones could easily benefit from them. And this is just one example of a housing association embarking on the drone adoption and digital transformation journey. And one of the challenges remains is that drone technology has not yet achieved widespread adoptions within the social housing sector. And it remains relatively unknown and about how they could be used within the business workflow. So in order to achieve widespread adoption, it will not only need determining the required drone and camera performance, but also efforts to promote the sharing of basic drone inspection know-how. And therefore, we've partnered up with PropTech Innovation Network to create something called a Connected Places DIN Lab. And we aim to work with a group of housing providers to understand how best to utilize the technology and create the blueprint for safe implementation within the sector and not just for one housing organization. Next slide, please. So how are we going to do this? In this discovery lab, we're looking to test the drone technology with housing providers to understand where and how drones can be utilized across their portfolio of assets. We'll be also looking to explore how organizations can use data capture to support their shift towards preventative maintenance. Housing providers will be able to work with the selected drone solution providers to explore the types of inspection outputs, and that could support data-driven decisions, starting from drone aerial imaging, then moving to advanced 3D modeling of their assets, which can be also enriched with additional documents and information. So with the sector facing tougher building safety bill and net zero carbon building commitments, we will also explore the use of drone thermal inspections to help organizations to achieve EPC clean growth strategy targets. Next slide, please. In the second part of the lab, we'll be hosting a series of workshops with housing providers to help them understand the roadmap to adoptions and become educated clients through this experience. We have convened drone industry body, drone service providers and regulators to help facilitate this journey. And this would be a great opportunity to gain access to experts from the CAA, Procurement for Housing, RPAS UK, as well as learning from each other in the lab to create the blueprint for other social housing to follow. And we'll be covering the 5 themes that you're seeing on the screen right now. Through our engagement on the Pathfinder Catalyst program, we have identified these as key considerations before implementing drone adoption strategy. And this includes understanding governance, leadership, and sponsorship buy-in, developing the business case and drone strategy that supports housing objectives, understanding regulation compliance around drone use, an operating model that fits housing organizations, including method to procure drone service. And finally, understanding the capability and capacity required to embed drone service into their workflow. And the way we've designed this lab is really exciting and a pragmatic approach with the sector and suppliers in scaling drone technology use. We held a briefing with PIN yesterday, and I will share the lab brochure in the chat. We're currently looking for more housing providers to join the lab. So if you are interested, please contact us directly via drones@cp.catapult.org.uk, and we'll be able to provide you with more information along with the expression of interest form. So that's it for my presentation. I think we have Q&A next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry and Emma, Mike and David, James and Gordon. So I ducked out halfway through that. I've come back and I've lost the Q&A. So Rachel has passed over some questions that came in my absence. But please do fill any in to add to those. So going right back to James's presentation from Alex at Neuron. Having read CAP 2248, I spotted that you say you can't use existing CAT DG training, only a bespoke DG RPAS course, yet the links you offer are only to the current CAT DG providers. So still leaving a gap that hasn't been completed yet, but needs a new hoop to go through. So James, I don't know if you've got any immediate response for Alex there.
Sure, absolutely. And thanks for the question, Alex. Having sought some advice from my DG colleagues, training should be commensurate with the operation. So in some cases, for the RPAS operation, the commercial air transport dangerous goods courses may not be enough. But you can go to an approved CA DG training school and either receive the standard CAT 6 course, I believe it's called, or ask them to design specific training to your operation. And I guess the wrap up there is that the training is the operator's responsibility to ensure that the training is appropriate for the operation.
Super, thank you. Alex, I hope that went some way to answer your question. We have a anonymous question around Amazon Prime UK were the first into the sandbox, but have withdrawn from the UK market. Did the CAA choose them on reputation, big marquee name, or that they were actually capable? If the latter, why would they have withdrawn unless the regulations made it too hard to work? Well, James, I'm not sure you're going to be able to shed much light on that for us, but is there anything you can add for our delegate?
Of course, yeah, and again, thanks for the question. So yeah, we selected Amazon Prime as one of our first sandbox companies because we wanted to explore their capability to operate BVLOS in non-segregated airspace. The work we did with Amazon has helped to inform CA's understanding of the safety requirements for BVLOS operations. And that's what has been brought into our published thinking in CAP 1861 and 1861A.
Thank you very much. And then a final question we have from Nigel. What is the CAA policy on the use of ADS-B for drone conspicuity, given the ICAO position on the subject? Will you differentiate between those conducting BVLOS and those conducting VLOS, for example, by MTOW?
Should have left my camera on, really, shouldn't I? So yeah, we are aware of the ICAO position regarding the capacity and the number of addresses available under the ADS-B frequencies, and we're looking at the feasibility of a secondary frequency for use on drones, which is 978 megahertz. Regarding the differentiation for those operations, so currently we're forming a task force to address this, as well as many other questions that come under this topic. And we expect to enhance this through the work that we're doing with the Airspace Modernisation Strategy Refresh. So I hope that helps.
Super, thank you. I think the next one, James, you can switch your camera off. This one's directed at Mike from Quentin, so thank you. Hi, Mike. Very interesting work on public perception, particularly the relationship between the lack of knowledge of drones and negative sentiment. The EASA study on social acceptance carried out some studies exposing the surveyees to drones so that they actually experienced them. Are you planning anything similar?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. Thanks for that, Quentin. I think the first round of surveys and research activity that we did with people was almost, we weren't giving them lots of specific details around the technology, what they look like, the noise levels, because it was almost about trying to understand what people think here and now. So now we've conducted this piece of work, we will be playing back these specific use case scenarios to people. And I think we might go down the route of giving them a bit more information so that they can actually visualize and understand what a drone would potentially look like, or what it might sound like. So we're not going to do experiments with people, but I think showing them in context of what it could look like flying over someone's house, to try and drive effective messaging in that way. So to some extent, yeah, I think we will be providing a bit more tangible examples, a few more tangible examples of what drones would look like in different use case scenarios and situations.
Super, thank you very much. So from what I can see in the chat and the Q&A, we've covered all the questions that have come up. So I think if Steve and Paul are ready, then I think we could move ahead, bearing in mind that we are ahead of lunch. We're between you and lunch. Actually being ahead is not necessarily a bad thing. So I would like to extend our gratitude to Steve Lim and Paul Chapman from Ofcom, who will give our first industry presentation before we then move to Rob from Buxton Mountain Rescue. So Steve and Paul, over to you, please.
Hi, well, very good morning to everybody, and I hope you can at least hear me and see the slides. So I should probably explain that although we're in the industry presentations part of this, we're not actually industry in Ofcom. We are the UK communications regulator, an independent public body that's charged with managing the radio spectrum and regulating the communications sector in the UK. So one of our primary roles is to make sure spectrum is used optimally and for the good of citizens and consumers in the UK. So our primary aim is to manage the radio spectrum in that capacity. So there's a few slides here, just looking at what we've been doing to look at how drones might operate on the mobile networks as opposed to in dedicated spectrum. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So the kind of backstory for this is because radio doesn't respect international borders, we collaborate particularly with our European neighbours, but also on a global level as well. So within Europe, to start with, there's the body called the CEPT, which is the Conference of European Postal and Telecommunications Administrations. So there's about 48 European countries part of that. They collaborate to produce technical studies and spectrum management decisions and recommendations and the like. So they've been looking at the use of drones on the mobile networks, particularly in the LTE bands. And last year they produced a report. ECC stands for Electronic Communications Committee. That's the kind of principal radio spectrum management committee of the CEPT. They produced report 309, which looked at the coexistence of drones with other systems that are in neighbouring bits of spectrum across all the mobile bands. Report 309 was published last year, as I said. There's still some additional work ongoing in respect of base stations using active antenna systems, which is a new technology. And the work in report 309 is being transformed into a spectrum management type decision of the ECC, which will be containing technical and operational conditions through which aerial user equipment could be used on the mobile networks. So we took that report and applied its findings to the UK using some parameters that we've already published in UK documents because the situation is peculiar to the UK. So we've produced some conclusions from that work. It is consistent with the ECC's report. Essentially then, so the mobile networks need to be able to recognize aerial user equipment in order to be able to implement specific measures to be able to manage their operation on the network. There was some work done in Europe that said that if something like 33% of the user equipment in a cell is aerial, or not more than 33%, then that is manageable within the network. But any more than that requires additional measures to be taken, for instance, drone ID, so that the traffic can be managed. The principal area of concern that we have falling out of the analysis is if the user equipment uses the 2.6 gigahertz mobile band, that can cause a problem to air traffic control approach radars, which operate in 2.7 gigahertz or just above that. I'll go on to that in more detail. There are a few options about how to resolve that problem, but at least in the initial phases of authorizing, we think the best way is probably to deny access to that band, but let other bands be usable. And additionally, there may be a need to consider some other certain sites to set up what we call no transmit zones around, simply because of the nature of what's happening on those sites. RAS stands for radio astronomy, so there's a potential need to ensure that they are protected because it's extremely sensitive. The signals they're trying to receive are basically extremely small, so any interference to those can cause problems. If you move on to the next slide, please. So looking in more detail at this issue of 2.6 and the radars at 2.7, we have about 88 of these radars up and down the UK. Essentially, the risk to those is a function of the spurious emissions performance from the user equipment. Using the analysis, we've converted the level of protection that the radars need, which we've published in our other documentation. That's to do with rolling out mobile networks in the 2.6 and 3.4 gigahertz band. And when those bands were released, there's a coordination document that exists about how the radars in 2.7 need to be protected. So we took that document and used the parameters of the user equipment, specifically the out-of-band emissions performance, and derived distances at which problems might exist to the radars. So it's a function of how good that out-of-band emission performance is. If you take the standardized performance, then you can see on the map there's some very large circles that tend to coalesce to form a sort of larger area. Those larger circles are about 78 kilometers radius, and that's based on the standardized level of out-of-band emissions. However, if the equipment performs better than that, and say 10 dB better at minus 40 dBm per megahertz, which is the 10 dB better than the standard, then you'll see some smaller circles that are darker green, still visible as circles. They're about 25K radius. And then if the performance is even better, 10 dB is even better, that reduces down to about 7 or 8 kilometers, something like that. So it does depend on how well this equipment performs. But it's important to note that even if it's far and away better than the standard, you still need some separation distance. But because we don't really know what the kind of performance is of equipment on drones, we think it's better at this stage, at least, to take a slightly precautionary approach and move towards thinking about just denying access to this band in the first instance. So if we move to the next slide, please. So there's some other issues as well as just avoiding radars. You might think, well, if a drone's on one mobile network, is there any difficulty to other mobile networks that share the same spectrum? And the answer is, it seems to be no. It doesn't seem to cause a problem to other mobile networks in the same bands. It's all manageable, within the same network if it's not such a large number of drones, but that doesn't cause any problems to neighboring networks. For radio astronomy, there are 6 sites actually. One site has 2 antennas on. That's at Jodrell Bank. They form a kind of networked astronomy capability. They're in these locations: Jodrell Bank, Cambridge, and then some more rural areas in sort of Cheshire and Herefordshire, I believe, that sort of area. It may be necessary to introduce a small, I've said exclusion zone. It really should be no transmit zone around those sites in order to protect them, but we haven't come to a decision as to whether that's necessary to do yet. And then finally, there's certain other kind of slightly more sensitive sites that we might want to impose a no transmit zone around as well. But again, we haven't put any decisions there. There's a hyperlink there to a document that's on our website, which when you get the full slides, you'll be able to see. It's part of what we call our UK frequency allocation table. And there's some annexes that sit with that, which give an explanation of the sort of sharing arrangements that we have with different kinds of services and users. If we move to the next slide, please. So next steps that we need to think about before we can move towards fully authorizing use of drones on the mobile networks. And I say authorizing, that's to do with spectrum usage, not to do with aeronautical or aviation type usage. So we need to resolve a few issues before we move ahead. So if we decide not to allow use in the 2.6 gigahertz band initially, we need to decide how to implement that. That's something we're thinking about at the moment, a number of options, but still no decisions yet. The mobile network operators will need to decide how to protect their own networks if the number of drones, as I sort of mentioned, exceeds something like 33% per cell. There's measures that need to be taken within the network to manage that situation. That might rely on the networks being able to identify whether a piece of user equipment connected to the network is aerial, whether it's a drone, and this kind of thing. We understand that future releases of the well, the mobile network generations, it's known as the third generation partnership project. They produce the standards. It's called release 17, I think, is the next one. That's when drone ID is coming, as we understand it, but it's not, as we understand it, it's not quite there yet. So there's a dependency on all this on when the mobile network operators will be ready and have the technology available to readily allow drone operation on their networks. And then if we decide to protect radio astronomy and the other sites, we need to find a way to do that and provide these no transmit zones. And not least, we need to work closely with the CAA, obviously, in their development of the BVLOS framework. That's relying on spectrum to an extent, so we need to work very closely with them. So the way forward, so in the short term, we have an existing route for authorizing use on an innovation and trials basis, and we call that our innovation and trials license. It's there, it's available, it's a fairly relaxed environment. We just have to clear it with a number of existing users, but it's not for operational use, and it's not, we can't use it on a commercial basis. So it's only literally for testing and development. And even in that case, we need the support or lack of objection from the mobile network operator, because it's their network that could be impacted. Looking a bit further forward in the medium term, if we can resolve these issues, then we will move to a consultation document about how to implement this authorization, and then move towards issuing spectrum licenses, which will allow full operational and commercial use. And then in the longer term, if some solutions are developed, which gets around some of the interference problems I've explained, then we can relax our licensing framework and ideally move towards license exemption. We exempt if there's no prospect or a very small prospect of harmful interference arising out of use. But where there isn't such a low risk, then we have to authorize that specifically. So if we can mitigate the problems, then we can move towards exemption. That depends on equipment standards, potentially, those with better out of band emission characteristics, and also further technical work. And so just as a reminder, on the final slide, if you move to that, there's another picture of this map. So you can see that using the standard out of band emission limits, there are very few areas that are not contained within one of those large green zones. So that's why we think, at least initially, it's probably sensible to just exclude that band from being available and move forward on the other bands. So with that, I've come to the end. So I'll pass back to, I guess, the next presenter. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen. So we're now welcoming Buxton Mountain Rescue and Rob to join us to talk through their activities.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me, Hannah?
I can hear you, yes, Rob, thanks.
Excellent stuff, thank you. Yeah, so I'm Rob Storley. I am Deputy Team Leader at Buxton Mountain Rescue Team. And I've had oversight of our drone programme since the start of the year. Like all mountain rescue team members, I'm a volunteer, so outside of mountain rescue I work full-time for the police. I'm afraid I'm used to giving presentations on our fairly ageing projector, so the font I've used might be a bit excessive for this presentation, but we'll give it a go. Next slide, please. So I'll just start you off with a very brief bit of background about our team and our history. The team was formed in 1964 following the 4-inch tragedy on Kinder Scout. That was an incident where 3 young scouts unfortunately died in an organised walking event. In the review following that, the rescue services were found to be lacking somewhat in the area, so it decided they'd formalise some rescue teams in the area, and Buxton Mountain Rescue Team was one of those teams that was set up at that point. As you'll see from the picture in the corner there, things did start off as a bit of a beg, borrowed, stolen type affair with fairly basic kit. However, I'm pleased to say we've evolved significantly over the last 60 odd years into a highly professional, well-trained, well-equipped team. So we now have 60 team members, 4 modern, highly capable vehicles, and 2 operational bases. In terms of the incidents we attend, the majority of them are injured or unwell persons, walkers, rock climbers in the Peak District National Park. But we also attend lost person searches, people who have got lost out on the moors, missing person searches for the vulnerable, whether that be Alzheimer's or depression. And then we also do some boat rescues every year. We attend some floods, and occasionally assist at major incidents should they come up, such as the Whaley Bridge partial dam collapse you might remember seeing on the telly. Over the years, we're lucky to have developed excellent relationships, not only with all of the emergency services in the area and the surrounding areas, but also with landowners all around us. Just to explain where we fit nationally, we're one of 7 mountain rescue teams in the Peak District National Park and one of 49 teams across England and Wales. Now, we do have an umbrella organisation called Mountain Rescue England and Wales. However, each of the 49 rescue teams is an individual charity, some of which have, like ourselves, already obtained operational authorisations for the use of drones as part of our search and rescue operations. Some teams are sort of in the early stages of looking into drone use, and some haven't started looking at drones at all. Our purpose is, as it says there, is saving lives in wild and remote places. So that is our charitable goal, and that's remained the same ever since the start in 1964 to today, and that will remain our goal moving forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so our drone journey. Things started off back in 2017 when someone suggested, why don't we have a look at drones? Could we set a drone program up? None of us knew a lot about drones, and we certainly didn't know much about the regulation that's attached to drone use. But we gave the nod, and we thought that sounded like a sensible thing to look at. So off they went, and they started looking at it. Quite a steep learning curve those first couple of years, getting our heads around the regulation and the required safety standards. We were pleased to be the first team in the UK to obtain a permission for commercial operation, as it was then. However, the COVID pandemic then hit, and mountain rescue got quite tricky. We had to try and keep on top of our normal training, but had to move all online. The frequency of call-outs became extremely sporadic. Unfortunately, drones took a bit of a back seat and didn't really get much attention, and were sort of sat in the back of the room gathering dust. So we took a little time to review our drone operations, and we decided that we needed to improve how we were using them. So I put in place this 3-phase strategy over 18 months to look at improving our use of drones. So the first phase that we've just come to the end of focuses on basically on increasing the use of them, and that was stuff we could resolve as a team with minimal investment. So things like putting the drones on our vehicles, aiming to deploy them at every call we go to, and making sure they're already charged up and ready to go. So that first phase has just come to an end, and we're just about to move into phase 2, which will see us train up 4 more pilots to the new GVC standards, which will take us up to 7 pilots in total. We then hope next year, early 2022, to move into phase 3, which is going to be where we look at obtaining a higher specification drone in terms of its robustness, being more capable in adverse weather conditions, hopefully more capable sensors, and indeed more safety features. I'm pleased to say, having just come to the end of that first phase, we have been successful in increasing our drone use. We went from 1 deployment about 3 deployments in about 18 months to 7 deployments in 6 months. So we've seen a big increase in our drone use. The following video will show you some of our work over the last 6 months. Hannah, if you wouldn't mind moving on to the video. Okay, thank you. So yeah, that shows what we've been up to over the last 6 months. The big shift in our thinking was drones were originally seen purely as a tool for missing person search. Frankly, we don't have too many missing person searches, but what we're now thinking is that drones aren't just useful for missing person search. They're in fact useful for, as you can see from that video, pretty much all of our operations, in that they can provide our incident managers excellent oversight of what's going out on the hill or in some of the cases there on the water. To move us forward, we're looking at organising an event. This will take place in February 2022. I'm just in the very early stages of this at the moment. The objectives for the event you'll see on the screen. What we wanted to do is demonstrate to the public, to regulators, and to any interested stakeholders and parties how useful drones can be to our operations. We've seen internationally and nationally in some cases how drones can be used to save lives, and we just want to give a really clear demonstration of how useful these bits of kit can be to our operations. I know you talked earlier about public perception and drones being well accepted in search and rescue. That has certainly been our experience, but we're keen to continue to build on it and maintain that positive perception. And then to highlight to regulators where we're being held back in terms of regulation. And then certainly at Buxton Mountain Rescue Team, our priority is always safety. So we only ever want to see regulation move on when it's safe to do so. But what we're saying is, look, we know we can use this kit for good. Please work with us and help us use it more widely. I've just seen a question pop up in the chat there, querying whether some of that was conducted beyond visual line of sight. It wasn't. All our operations are currently conducted within visual line of sight of our pilots, which, as you can imagine, in a mountain rescue setting is somewhat limiting, but we do appreciate, obviously, the safety reasons behind that. Next slide, please. So our event we're looking at organising in February, it's going to be based on a real life scenario that we've attended in the past. It will again still be conducted within visual line of sight at this stage. We are going to be working with Evolved Dynamics, makers of the Sky Mantis, the drone you can see in the corner there. This is an all-weather drone. It's ruggedized. It's got a very powerful thermal camera, extended flight time, and is capable of live linking to our patrol vehicles. And we've also got coming along the RAF mountain rescue teams and David Blood, our training provider. Today, I suppose I'd just like to say, if anybody is interested, and I've seen Sarah popped in the chat there, if anyone is interested in working with us on this project or other projects to help develop our drone use, we would be really keen to work with them. I will pop my details in the chat shortly. I think we're moving back onto questions anyway, aren't we, Hannah? So I can hand back to you at this point.
Thank you very much, Rob. So as I live on the edge of the Peak District in Sheffield, and as a mountain biker, paddleboarder, wild swimmer, I'm very grateful to the voluntary mountain rescue services local to my area. So thank you to all you and the mountain rescue teams nationally do to keep us safe. And I think it's a great marriage between my professional and my personal life. Thinking about how we can apply drones in a drones for good scenario like this to make the outdoors a safer place for us all to be. So thank you very much for that presentation. I think you answered the questions that Sarah reached out with, so thank you very much. I don't see any further questions currently in the Q&A. I'm not confident though. Gordon has sent a message. Good to know there's regulatory constraints, safety concerns, limiting safety benefits. Have you considered smaller drones? And also, here's Gordon, so I'll hand over.
Sorry, just because I can, I thought I might. Just read there was an Air Accident Investigation Bureau report on Network Rail who had a drone drop, and the conclusion they came to is for the inspections they were doing, they were just going to go to much smaller drones. So that 250 gram cutoff as opposed to the 1.5 kilogram drone they were using before. It seemed to help them a lot. Now, I appreciate you may have more ruggedized needs, but that seemed to be a solution they had. And then my second point was just, making that value for money case, combining the needs and service operational delivery solutions. Very difficult to do in practice across institutions and budget lines and everything, but I wonder, is that something that you've looked at at all? Be really interested in your insights in that, working with, say, other emergency services, or I know the Coast Guard have done a lot of stuff, but sort of further afield. I wonder how, whether it was something we can help you convene or learn from your experience on that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Gordon. In terms of drone size, I suppose, as you say, the ruggedness is a factor for us. One of the issues that holds us back is weather. So looking at drones that are more capable in adverse weather typically are larger, which is one of the reasons looking at slightly larger drones. The other factor being the size of the drone, to some extent, limits the size of the sensor and the power of the sensors. So I suppose that's why we're looking at slightly bigger drones at the moment. In terms of working with people and other agencies, we're certainly really keen to. We work quite closely with Derbyshire Police here anyway, who have a drone capability. And as I say, we've invited the RAF mountain rescue teams along to that event in February, but we're certainly keen to work with anybody that would like to.
Super, thank you. Well, if there's no further questions from the delegates that have joined us, Kathy has sent us a message. Have you considered using radar systems for your drones, mainly to benefit from all weather conditions and more information through penetration? So, Rob, it sounds like that was...
Was that for me, sorry, Hannah?
I think that was probably directed at you, yes.
Yeah, and I've just seen another one about, could we use them to deliver survival kits? Yeah, so I suppose we're still very much in the infancy of this. At the moment, as I say, we're just using 2 small DJI Mavics. As I say, the intention is to look at something bigger next year, bigger and hopefully more powerful and more flexible. The options are endless, as a lot of people know. So yes, we could potentially use them to deliver some sort of survival bags to people on the hills. And we've also looked at, could they be used to deliver defibrillators to people really quickly, and that's something that's being done in France quite a lot. So we're very much open to ideas and open to talking through things and seeing what we can do. There's obviously only so much you can put on one drone, but we're keen to do as much as we can. What was the first question? Sorry, Hannah?
Sorry, Rob, I didn't catch the question.
What was the first question that was just asked of us there? I find the Q&A easier to use. It was whether you considered using radar because of the better penetration. That was it, yeah. So yeah, I mean, as I say, we're open to anything. Radar, I know there's systems being developed that can detect mobile phones and signals from mobile phones, and I think someone mentioned Snowdonia, we're looking at something similar. So yeah, at the moment we're very much open and considering everything, really. And yeah, the ANAFI someone just talking about there's plenty of options, and part of the plan behind this event is to explore those options. So if you do have any suggestions, please do contact me with the details there, and we'll certainly look to integrate them and hopefully feedback again following the event next year.
Fantastic. I know that in some of the Future Flight Phase 2 challenges, Rob, there are other rescue organisations looking at drones as well. So it might be worth us pulling that network together for the event in February as well. Perhaps some joint work we could do there. So that sounds like something good to follow up. Thank you very much to everyone for using the chat and being so active there. I hope that you have connected with the people that you've seen that are relevant. I'm just going to drop a link into the chat. This link is for our Advanced Future of Air Mobility accelerator. So when we work and talk about air mobility, many of the technologies that are being developed that could be applicable for drones also could apply to other classes of vehicle, such as advanced air mobility. So we do have a number of challenges that have been set there. We're looking for SMEs with the right technologies to solve those challenges. So don't feel constrained. If drones are your current use for your technology, it may be that it's applicable elsewhere. Please do go and have a look. And also Emma mentioned during her talk that we have a Transport Expo coming up next month, where we'll be mentioning all of the trigs that we've got running. So the drone trig that you saw presented today, which is really inspirational. I'm really excited about seeing what comes out the back of those, but also the other trig events that we've got ongoing. And you can see how the drone community and the new classes of air vehicle communities fit into the transport community. And one of the things that I think we need to work on helping the transport community realise is that we're now part, in the future, there will be a paradigm shift, and we are going to be part of the transport system, not an integrated transport system, and then thinking about air, but actually air being very much part of that day-to-day consideration. So whilst I do encourage all of my colleagues within the transport systems to be considering air and aviation, I would encourage all of us to also be thinking about where we fit in the in aviation fits into the integrated transport systems of the future. So that might be worth a look as well. So I just want to say thank you again to all of our speakers today. And I look forward to hearing from all of you in the future. On the screen there is the drone's email address. I also popped that into the chat earlier. We are live doing our Catalyst program as we speak, looking for demonstrations. We have a number of demonstrations lined up over the coming 6 months that I'm really excited we'll get to demonstrate to you and disseminate over the coming months. But if you do think you've got an idea for a demonstration or a technology that you could contribute, the RFI is still open on our website, and you can contact us directly at the drones website there. So thank you once again to our speakers, Fozia and Simon, who are no longer on the call, Gordon, James, David, Mike, Emma, Howie, Steve, Paul and Rob. It's been a pleasure to listen to you sharing your activities today. I'm delighted to have been given the opportunity in this role to now be taking this forward, and I look forward to a bright future. Thank you very much.